Welcome back to Movies Explained, where we break down your favorite movies. Today we will be recapping a horror drama movie called I Spit on Your Grave. So without further ado, let's begin. The movie starts with Jennifer Hills, a young worried girl driving. Soon she arrives at an old messed up garage, where she was greeted by an old man named Earl, who was as messed up as his garage. Jennifer explained after her introduction that she was a novelist looking for inspiration for her next novel. The man gives her the map and keys to a cabinet and instructs her on how to move around the area, after which she continues her journey. But soon she was lost. She stopped at a gas station to refill when she encountered a young man, Johnny Stillman, along with other men in the background can be seen. She inquired about the Mockingbird Trail, and he informed her that she had passed her location and would have to return. While the gas was being refilled, Johnny attempted to flirt with Jennifer. She spilled the gasoline on him as he attempted to get the keys for her. To cover her blunder, Jennifer paid extra. She arrived at an old cabinet on a lakeside among the trees, which resembles the garage from the first scene. As soon as she settles in, Jennifer started working on her novel. When she noticed some movement in the jungle but ignored considering some birds. She noticed the movement again at night, while on the phone with a friend, but this time she did not ignore it and got alert. She immediately hung up and checked the garage and surroundings, but she could not find anyone. When she returned, she spilled the wine on her shirt. Irritated by the spill, Jennifer was naked while washing her shirt when someone recorded her focusing on her hips and other parts of her body from the outside. A creaking sound interrupted her jog the following morning. She followed it and was led to an abandoned cabinet like hers. The bathtub was stained red, and in the kitchen, there were rusted metal canes and old and broken wine bottles. Terrified, she came back immediately. She couldn't take her mind off what she saw in the cabinet and yelled when she noticed rusted water coming from her bathroom sink's tap. The flush was also broken, so she called for assistance. Her misery did not stop there. Her phone slipped from her grasp into the flush. Excited by a single good thing after a long time, Jennifer kissed the boy, Matthew Dunkin, who fixed her washroom. The following scene depicts the three boys from the gas station from the first scene fishing and drinking in the middle of the forest, and Matthew soon joins them. When one of them, Stanley Woods, informed others that Jennifer kissed Matthew, Matthew assured them that it was true and that she likes him. This hurt Johnny's ego as Jennifer had rejected him earlier at the gas station. Changing the topic, Stanley showed the video of Jennifer, which he had recorded earlier. But Johnny was still thinking about Jennifer ignoring him and showed no interest in the video. Andy Chirinsky, one of the men from the gas station, taunted Johnny that he could not get Jennifer. Johnny took that as a challenge and said to Matthew that he would guide him on how to date Jennifer, while they bitched about Jennifer. That night, Jennifer tried to write but was still irritated about the pathetic day she had, and her cell phone was not working. So she stopped writing and was smoking when she again heard a creaking sound. When she checked outside, no one was there. She came back in but was scared. She locked the door behind her and was going to bed when she heard a thud as someone tried to break in, but it was just a dead crow. She once again heard that same sound, so she went to check the store. She was relieved to find that no one was there, but when she came back to the cabinet, her laptop wallpaper was showing three men from the gas station. Exactly at that moment, Johnny once again pounded on her door, and the three of them stormed it. Jennifer could not move an inch due to fear. Stanley had his camera on and was recording everything. Johnny had a conversation with Jennifer while Andy threw light-up matchsticks and other things at her. Jennifer tried to threaten them with the police and a non-existing boyfriend, but they knew her phone was not working. Then Johnny called Matthew in and threw him in the corner. She begged them to leave and offered them money, but Johnny asked her to drink with them. She refused. Andy tortured her with matchsticks until she agreed to drink. After she drank, Johnny forced Jennifer to show her teeth and hit her on the back of her head with a baseball bat when she could not do it. After that, Johnny pulled her to her knees and forced her into a sexual act with his gun. Then Johnny invited Matthew, who had been sitting in the corner the whole time, terrified and crying. He refused to come, so Andy took Johnny's place, but he had a wine bottle instead of the gun. Jennifer hit Andy with that bottle and sprayed black pepper into Johnny's eyes and was able to run from that hell. She ran through the forest until light broke through the night sky, when she ran into a police officer and the old man who gave her the map. She told them everything, and the officer could name the men. The police officer brought her back to the cabinet, and after looking around the cabinet where he found a huge amount of wine and a joint, the police officer said that she was making up the story and called for backup. Jennifer tried to protest. He told her to stand against the window and inappropriately touch her while he pretended to check on her. This alerted Jennifer's sixth sense, but not before she could do something. Johnny, along with Andy, Stanley with his recording camera, and Matthew, the officer's backup, came back. The officer was with the men. This time, they were led by the officer who assaulted Jennifer using his gun. When he was done with her, he threw her on the floor and asked her to get on her knees. He tried to pull her by her hair, when Jennifer slapped him. In return, he slapped her. After this, Johnny took over and forced Matthew to rape her. When he refused, Johnny cut her trousers and forced her to dance. Jennifer cried and begged but was not heard. Matthew agreed. They all forced Matthew on Jennifer. All of this was recorded on camera. Jennifer went out into the forest in that state after they left, and to her dismay, she ran into them again. Andy took over this time and dipped her face in a small pound of water, holding her with hair multiple times, each time for a longer period of time in the water. Jennifer struggles for her breath and continues to beg them, but those monsters continued to torture and assault her. When Andy was done, the police officer raped her in front of the camera and in the middle of the forest. Jennifer attempted to save herself by reaching for the officer's gun, but she was unsuccessful. The police officer was followed by Andy and Johnny, after which Jennifer passed out for a few minutes. She was laying in the mud naked. But when she came back to her senses, she got up, looked at their faces one last time, and walked away. She was unable to walk properly because her legs and arms were deformed, and her balance was off. She was drenched in mud and looked almost dead. All of them followed her to the bridge except Matthew. The officer tried to shoot her, but she jumped off the river before he could. This worried them, and they waited for her to come to the surface so they could make sure that she was dead. After waiting for some time, the officer instructed them to check on the banks along the whole river. But still, no clue about Jennifer. So, the officer said they will repeat this every day until they find her dead body. Meanwhile, they will burn away her stuff from the cabinet to remove any traces of Jennifer. He also destroyed the recording tape from Stanley's camera. Andy, Johnny, and Stanley came back to the cabinet to burn the Jennifer's things where Johnny warned them about Matthew and that he might create a problem for them, while Matthew stayed back to look for Jennifer in the river. The officer came back home, where his pregnant wife and daughter were introduced. The next morning, the officer visited the Earl and told him that Jennifer had left. He handed back the keys and said nothing more about the cabinet. Matthew was still in the river looking for Jennifer as he recalled what had happened to her. Andy was taking care of Jennifer's cars and other things. Time passes, and they continue to look for Jennifer but fail. Their lives gradually return to normal, except that Matthew's condition deteriorated as a result of Jennifer's trauma. Then one day, Matthew was sitting in the middle of the forest when he saw Jennifer. But this time, she was in her pajamas, and her eyes were full of revenge. Matthew covered his face out of fear and shouted, and then soon Jennifer was gone without a sound as she was never there. That night Earl called the police officer and informed him that someone was inquiring about Jennifer as no one had seen her since last month. The officer asked to cover as he knew everything, but Earl asked him to call that lady. This left Earl in distress, and once again, his life was in a bit of trouble. The next morning, Stanley informed Andy and Johnny that his camera had been stolen. At first, they did not take him seriously, but when Stanley told them that the camera had the tape with Jennifer's videos, the one which the officer destroyed was empty. Johnny lost his patience and tried to strangle him. Andy tried to interfere, but with his interference, Johnny started beating him. Andy told him that he needed to stay calm, as they should be united in this problem. In the following scene, at night, Johnny was watching TV and drinking when he heard the same thud as someone throwing something at his door during Jennifer's time. When he checked it out, it was just a dead crow. He came back in but was scared. Again, there was a thud. This time he went out with a gun, but it was the same old dead crow. He waited there for someone to come out, but no one showed up. When he comes back in, he seems restless as he keeps looking at the door. It was not long before that sound was back. But this time it was due to Jennifer's slippers, and he saw a movement behind the bushes. When he went out to check, no one was there, but Matthew's rubber bands were on the ground. The next morning, when the officer came home, his wife told him that their daughter had received a tape, but she was unable to play it and asked if he could play it for her. That was the tape from Stanley's camera with Jennifer's recordings. He left immediately with the tape, while Johnny called Stanley and Andy and explained what happened to him last night. He blamed Matthew for it while he showed them Jennifer's slippers and Matthew's rubber bands. Soon, the officer also joined them and told them about the tape. He was angry at Stanley, shoved that tape in his mouth, and blamed him for sending the tape when Johnny put that on Matthew. 2. He asked them to bring Matthew to him until tonight. Otherwise it would not end well for them. Before leaving, he threw the tape into the fire. The officer killed Earl while on a hunt with him, clearing up any loose ends. While Matthew was outside Jennifer's cabinet by the lake, he heard her calling his name. He ran in and again Jennifer's voice echoed calling him. Matthew panicked and fell down the stairs. That was when he saw Jennifer sitting on the sofa. She asked him to sit with her and questioned him about how he knew that she was alive. When he went to her, he cried and apologized, and said he was trying to help, but Jennifer strangled him to death with a rope. While Andy and Stanley were searching for Matthew in the forest, Andy heard pounding footsteps and someone throwing rocks in the pond. He called out for Matthew, assuming that it was him for a good amount of time, but no one showed up. He followed that sound, and it was Stanley. After which they heard someone playing the police officer's instrument. They followed that tone and were led to an old cabinet. Stanley stayed out, and Andy went to check in the cabinet, where he found some stuff indicating that someone was living there, when he heard Stanley shouting for help. When he came out, Stanley had been trapped by a mouse trap set by Jennifer. Before he could do anything, Jennifer hit both of them with a baseball bat, and they were unconscious. Andy woke up tied above a bathroom tub while his mouth bled in the tub and the water filling it was turning red. Meanwhile, Jennifer dealt with Stanley. She tied him to a tree and taped the area under his chin to the end of his face. Jennifer took his camera and began recording in the same way that Stanley had. After placing the camera on a high point, she shoved a dead old mouse into Stanley's mouth and forced him to eat that. She then pressed his fishing rod against his eyelids, causing his eyes to bleed. This whole time, Andy was calling Matthew, still believing he was doing this. When Jennifer went to see him, he was shocked to see her. Jennifer dipped Andy's face in the water in the very same manner as Andy did hers. He begged her to stop, but she did not stop just like them. She came back to Stanley and rubbed the raw fish on his face, after which she went back in to get done with Andy. She put lye in the bath water and forced Andy to put his face in it. He died after dipping his face a few times. His face was burned and unrecognizable as it was a strong alkaline solution. Meanwhile, wild crows fed on Stanley, and soon he died due to bleeding from his eyes. Once she was done with Andy and Stanley, Jennifer went for Johnny next at the gas station. She brought him back to the cabinet and tied him up with ropes naked. She copied his own pattern, which he applied to Jennifer to torture Johnny. Jennifer removed his teeth, put the gun in his mouth, and in the end she cut his private parts. Johnny died of excessive bleeding, after which Jennifer went to the officer's house as her daughter's teacher. From there, she called him and said she would see him soon. After hearing her voice, he came back home immediately, but by the time Jennifer took his daughter to the park. So, the officer followed her, where she kidnapped him and brought him to the cabinet. She tied him up and bent over the table. Jennifer used his gun to assault him, just like he raped her. He cried and begged her to let him go, but she tied his gun trigger to Matthew's hand, who was still alive but unconscious. She left them and went out. Both were killed when Matthew woke up and tried to move. The movie ended here. Thanks for watching. Please remember to like and subscribe for more great videos. We will see you in the next one.